Hello, Night Nation. I'm Trylko from the Sons of UCF, joined by Eric Lopez of the Black and Gold Banneret. Welcome to Around the Kingdom. Elo, hello.
Trace, hello. Coming up on the fastest UCF show, UCF basketball. Not after the best of starts in the Big 12, but hey, help perhaps for the UCF defense in football? We'll break it down coming up on this edition of Around the Kingdom.
Well, before we get going, let's welcome in the third member of our team, Adam Eaton from the Sons of UCF. Keeps an eye on the clock and keeps us on our toes. Adam, hello.
Greetings, gentlemen. I don't know how to feel, right? We're in the Big 12. We have Kansas coming up. It feels anticlimactic. I'm hoping you two can talk me out of it or tell me how to feel about this game on Wednesday night.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. All right, we'll check
Fingers
back
crossed
with you, Adam. Elo, before we get to hoops, a little football talk, comings and goings, some booms in Night Nation, landing some guys in the portal. But a very important cog in the offense is going. That would be wide receiver Javon Baker announcing that he's pursuing his opportunity for a career in the National Football League. Impact on the Knights. How serious is this loss?
I know this will be a hot take. I don't think it's that big of a loss. I know he was a talented receiver, but I think we got guys that can replace him. I was more surprised that he announced on the day of the bowl game that he was coming back. I just assumed this was going to be the conclusion eventually. The timing is more than what surprised me, but I know people are going to be concerned, but I think if you're telling me this creates more opportunities for guys like Xavier Townsend, I'm all for it. I think they've added some receivers since in the portal, obviously, some younger guys. But I think if I'm a receiver on that UCF roster, I'm like, opportunity is knocking now. And I think you'll be fine.
Well, you mentioned a wide receiver that comes in. Wide receiver Goldie Lawrence transfers from Florida State. He is a Seminole High School product locally in Sanford. He may be one that comes in. You mentioned Xavier. You mentioned as well returning Kobe Hudson. Only a couple of guys really got the majority of the touches last year at wide receiver, but you do need three strong.
You do, but you mentioned it. I don't think the ball's going to be distributed to 8, 7, 8, 9 guys. That's not going to be KJ Jefferson. That's not his style. That's not how the system works. And I do think guys like a Xavier Townsend can step up in that role. Who, when you say this, Trace, if you look back at last year's offense, one of the kind of curious stuff's like, man, why didn't Xavier Townsend get more touches, right? Now you could say, well, there's only so much spreading around the ball you could do, but I think that guy could have a breakout year. So that's why I'm not too sweating the Javon Baker, especially with Kobe Hudson coming back. And who knows if they're going to add some more here between now and the spring on the football. But to me, the bigger story is on the defensive side of the ball. And clearly, Trace, I don't know if you picked up on this, but this UCF staff seems to like Luke Fickell players.
Yes.
They're picking up guys from Cincinnati, including defensively, which, hey, that's not a bad idea. To me, that's what stands out.
Let me ask you this. You're one that talks about brands in college football. Do you put a lot of stock in, well, they didn't land an Alabama guy. They got a guy from UNLV and linebacker Xavier Carter. Do you buy into the brand names and the importance of that when it comes to the transfer portal?
No, because I think we've seen that up close, that just because you bring in a guy from a big-time program doesn't mean it's going to pan out. We had some linebackers last year that was from a big-time program. Didn't pan out. Can you play or not? Really, right? And by the way, these brand programs whiff too. So give me guys that can produce. Now, some guys maybe are underutilized and fit a system, but no, give me guys that have produced. I'm not going to get caught up in where they played as long as they played. So we'll see. Long times to go, folks. Lots of football news. Hey, the college football season's over, Trace. I don't know if you heard, but Michigan destroyed Washington in the national championship.
Asterisk.
Congrats to former Knight Cam Good, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
On the Michigan roster, national title. But hey, just because the season just ended this week doesn't mean that it's not too early for the top 25 preseason polls coming out by all the writers, including our very own favorite, Brett McMurphy, with his top 25. Of note in the Big 12, Arizona, yes, Arizona will be in the Big 12, ranked 8th in Brett McMurphy's poll. Kansas State, 12th. Oklahoma State, 15. Utah, 19. Kansas, 23. West Virginia, 25. That's 6 teams UCF not listed. Your thoughts, Trace, when you saw Brett McMurphy's rankings?
I laughed because I know your sleeper Big 12 championship game pick is Utah and Arizona, which is just a Pac-12 game, right? UCF not yet earning the respect of pollsters, right? And KJ Jefferson and the other portal acquisitions, as well as the highly touted recruiting class, UCF not in the mix there. Some, though, saying UCF will be in the top half, may contend, but amongst the brands that are getting recognized, UCF not one of them in these early predictions.
These kind of articles, and you get it when you're a college football writer, that's like the go-to content. Like, what else are you going to write about, right? We know these rosters are going to change between now and like September. But of note, UCF has 3 of those 6 teams on the schedule, Arizona, Utah in particular, coming here to Orlando. So that's not too bad. I think West Virginia is overrated at 25. Obviously, I'm on the Arizona bandwagon there at 8. I think Utah might be a little low at 19, but they've had some injuries. But that, I think this is, it tells you the Big 12 is deep, and I think UCF could have a very exciting schedule. But I think there's this idea that UCF's schedule is easier. I don't necessarily agree with that, although it's easier from a travel standpoint. I believe they only leave the East Coast 3 times this year versus last year, which I know you appreciate. Mm-hmm. But it's still not going to be easy, Trace, with this schedule coming up.
Yeah, easier from a travel standpoint. You mentioned the East Coast games in Gainesville and at West Virginia. How about that quality loss UCF had to West Virginia? What's interesting is some of the names here. Kansas, for years a doormat, back in the top 25. West Virginia, remember, they were going to be picked last, and maybe their head coach would be fired, and they end the season in the rankings. So what it says to me, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving wide open, so why not UCF making a name for itself in its second year in the Big 12?
Sneak in there, surprise. Again, these are just preseason polls, and that's why they needed to get KJ Jefferson. All those teams that are ranked have talented quarterbacks for the most part coming back. Kansas has pretty much their whole team coming back at this point, so that explains some of the rankings there by Brett McMurphy. But boy, it's a little different than the days in the American where you would try to find somebody to get one spot into the rankings. But remember, 12-team playoff, Trace, starts next year, so hey, live the dream.
That is true. That is true. Basketball fans, no doubt, following the Orlando Magic and the success early on in the season. Something you noted, the Magic retiring longtime favorite Shaquille O'Neal's jersey, which prompted the conversation. Elo, football, men's basketball. Would you retire a jersey? If so, who?
All right, now let's go some ground rules. Are we assuming Dante Culpepper's number 8 is retired? Because they've honored Culpepper, Kevin Smith.
They've honored them, but I don't think they've officially retired any numbers, right?
Well, all right. So if they're not retired, Culpepper and Kevin Smith, I think everybody would agree unanimous should be retired. But I'm going to go with more recent guys. I think Shaquem Griffin, number 18. Hello, what a perfect guy to retire a jersey on the football, and that really is the perfect symbol for this program and what it, and what you would want it to be represented by than Shaquem Griffin on the football side. And then I'll give you a bonus basketball one. Taco Fall, number 99. Put that up on the rafters. I would say Jermaine Taylor, but the problem is Jermaine and BJ Taylor both wore number 1, so I don't know what you do there. But I would go Taco basketball, Shaquem Griffin, and football.
I will tell you that I'm not really in favor at the college level of retiring numbers, and I'm really not good at remembering numbers. I think 8 in Dante Culpepper needs to be retired. We talk all the time about the Mount Rushmores. And if you're going to go beyond Dante, 10 in Mackenzie Milton, because I think that would be a name that you would consider as well on Mount Rushmore. You mentioned basketball. Jermaine Taylor is the one that I had because he, to me, is a Mount Rushmore candidate for men's basketball. But see, this is why I'm not in favor. As you just mentioned, 2 guys wearing number 1. BJ Taylor, one of the greats to play for UCF men's basketball as well. What I think we can agree on is that when the regular season begins, how about guys on the roster not having the same number during the regular season?
I agree with that. Blake Bortles, number 5, is another one. And you can also do what women's soccer. Nobody wears number 10 for UCF women's soccer. Why? Because that was the number Michelle Akers wore. Right? Michelle Akers. So, all right. By the way, your polo, Sons of UCF, should be retired on the Sons of UCF polo. Throw that out.
Has Adam gotten you a Sons of UCF polo yet?
No. That's why I meant
that was a subtle hint.
There you go. Moving on. I mentioned earlier Michigan won the national title. Jim Harbaugh, Trace, your favorite head coach, said that he supports revenue sharing models where the players get a piece of the pie from all the TV money. Heck, he even made a comment that some of the employees should chip in on that. Your reaction on, for now, at least as of this recording, the current head coach of Michigan, Jim Harbaugh's thoughts?
Has he anteed in officially after he collected $1 million bonus for winning the national championship? I think it was $1 million. I think it is the right direction to go. Salaries out of control, especially amongst these top head coaches. Somewhere this model, this name, image, and likeness model evolved into shifting the burden onto the fans and the boosters and the donors instead of using TV revenue and reducing the salary allotments that go to coaches like Harbaugh and Saban. So I am completely in favor of that and taking the burden off of fans to retain players and acquire players.
So here's the problem with that. Okay, that works in football with all the money. What do you do about the other sports? For example, ESPN just did an 8-year extension for all the other NCAA championships. What do you do with volleyball, for example? Are you giving them a piece of that portion of money? How do you distribute all that money towards that? Who's going to be in charge of that? And I don't think that's going to prevent boosters from still spending money on players, because I think that's been going on for a long time. But I do agree with what Jim is saying in that, hey, the players should have gotten some piece of this pie, probably should come from TV. And maybe if this would have happened years ago, instead of the NCAA fighting this and being nitpicky about, hey, you just posed at a car dealership, we're gonna vacate your wins. Maybe we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with, Trace.
Well, the NCAA puts itself into a lot of situations, but how funny all of this has changed in just a couple of short years. Where will it be a couple of years from now? Do we see that greater revenue sharing model? All I know is ESPN drew a lot of viewers for the national championship game and made a lot of money on the backs of a lot of players. All right, time to bring back in Adam. Time for a silly game.
Bit of a cheap shot on that polo reference there, Trace. But luckily, you know what else is cheap, by the way? Sultry Spirits. They are the proud sponsors of Around the Kingdom here. And if you need to get your party cranked up to the next level, it's after the new year now. Some people are doing dry January. You don't want to be one of those people. This is the time you need to party. And the Sultry Spirit can help you out. Their bartenders will give you some fantastic cocktails with some creative twists. They will turn your party up to the next level. They will bring the fun with them because they are a mobile bartending service. If you want to get in touch with them, you can either find them on Instagram at The Sultry Spirit or give them a phone call, 941-567-7062. Ask for our friend Miles. He's a friend of the program. And if you tell him you heard about this on the Sons of UCF Around the Kingdom shows, he will give you 10% off and a special gift. So crank that party up. Get the Sultry Spirit out there. Have a good time. 941-567-7062. Gentlemen, game time. Elo, I'm going to start with you. Simple questions again this week. Simple questions, nothing out of the ordinary. Sure. We were talking Javon Baker. We were talking football. So here's your question, Eric. Does Javon Baker rank as a top 5 wide receiver at UCF all time?
All time? No. I would not put him top 5 all time. Traquan Smith's better. Gabe Davis is better. Are the most recent guys. You got to put Mike Sims Walker ahead of him, who had a lengthy NFL career. Brandon Marshall is ahead of him. That's 4 right there.
Well, what if he just did his college career? Just college careers alone. Was he top 5?
Well, now you got a better argument, right? You got a better argument. Here's my problem, Adam. What's the most memorable play of Javon Baker we're going to remember? Can you name it? What's the most memorable play? He doesn't have a Brashad Hale Perriman play that we remember, or a Hawaii, the Hawaii Bowl performance from a Marshall. What's the most memorable thing he did outside of, it seemed like against Oklahoma when nobody's covering him, he breaks one and makes a sign or whatever. I don't know what famous play he ever did that I'm going to remember.
Elo, not a fan. Trace, how about you? Top 5 college player, Javon?
No, and I think some of these guys that Elo just mentioned, we're not going to see future players play 4 years, 3 years, maybe 2. And I don't think the contributions that a guy makes in 1 or 2 years will surpass some of the accolades and the accomplishments of guys that Elo mentioned. So no, and I think, he transferred in. He toyed with the fan base on social media. I don't know how beloved he is, and I don't know how much the passage of time will make him more liked and respected. So for me, no.
All right, let's move to basketball. Trace, we'll start with you. There are 9 home games on the basketball schedule starting Wednesday, Kansas. The number is 4.5. Over under number of sellouts this year for home basketball games. Again, 4.5. Do you want the over or under number of sellouts, home basketball games?
I think going historically, and I think if they have sellouts, it will be in large part because of the visiting fan base. It won't be because of local Orlando and Central Florida or the UCF fan base. I'm going to go under because all told, how many sellouts do they have? That would be a high number for them. So I'm going to go with the under.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go under because so far we only know of one sellout, which is Kansas. Maybe we get Baylor's a sellout. I don't think Houston sells out because we've played Houston every year.
It wasn't a sellout when they were here.
Correct. Correct. And if the season goes a certain way, like we think we are, yeah, not the demand for the tickets may not be there. But so I'm going to say under, unfortunately. I hope I'm wrong, though. I hope Adam rubs this in like in 5 weeks from now or like a year, 2 months from now and says, boy, you guys were way off. But I don't think so.
JP Gilbert retirement plan is not looking strong right now on the resale market. All right, I'm going to go to you next, Elo. Now that the 4-team playoff era of the college football life is behind us, compare and contrast this. Was the 4-team playoff era better than the previous BCS era? Yes or no?
That's a great question, Adam. Man, you're good. You're good. We should retire your polo as
Thank
well.
You. I appreciate it.
I think it is because you didn't leave a third team out, but that's not saying a lot because the previous system was flawed. It depends. If you're a pro bowl person, if you like bowl games, then no, this was not better. But if you like having extra playoff games and the best team win the national title, then yes.
I'd say no. I don't think this system has worked well, and I'm looking forward to the next system.
That wasn't his question, though. His question was it better than the previous system?
No.
There we go.
No.
Thanks for the insight, Trace. All right, last one. With all due apologies to our friend Eric Lopez. Trace, if I asked you to right now, can you access the Peacock network? Yes or no?
Elo and I have been bantering about this. Yes, because I may have borrowed someone's login for this. I have not. I will likely not see the game.
On the record, strike that from the record, Trace. Self-incrimination. Don't do it to yourself.
I will not be available to watch that game until late anyway. Not a fan of this streaming only for an NFL playoff game, though.
Elo, you are a diehard Dolphins fan. Yes. And so this is probably in South Florida, you can see the game locally. You obviously are outside of that coverage zone. So can you access Peacock? If not, what is your plan for Saturday night?
No, I have Peacock legally. I don't need to borrow. I purchased because, as you know, I'm also a wrestling fan, and WWE has a lot of their shows on Peacock. So I have Peacock, so I will watch the game. But I am like Trace. I'm surprised this is not on linear television, considering it's Mahomes and the Chiefs. But hey, it is what it is.
All right, gents, enjoy the rest of your show.
Going to be a lot of upset people when they look for this game on Saturday night. All right, we've been talking a little bit about basketball. Elo, this is a segment we call What Went Right, What Went Wrong, in review of the previous UCF men's basketball game, except it's Kansas State 77, UCF 52. So it's what went wrong and did anything go right for the Knights on the road in Manhattan, Kansas, starting their Big 12 playoff now 0-1.
I'll go with the positives. From what I hear, the flight was good. No issues with
charter
the
flight.
Yeah. And it's just one game, right? One game and the result. That's it. All right, that takes care of that.
Can I throw out a positive for you, Elo?
Yeah.
UCF only missed 2 free throws. Only 2. They were 3 of 5 from the line, but only missed 2.
Yeah, that Big 12 officiating crew. It's going to be fun to deal with all year. Look, nothing went, obviously, what's wrong. Dug yourself a hole, 12-0. Not a good situation, especially when you're playing in an arena that's known as the Octagon of Doom. Like, how can anybody think things are going to go
that
well?
That trumps the dungeon, right? That's a better name.
Just a tad, yeah. They got out. They got beaten on the 3-point line. They didn't protect the defensively. They just turned the ball over. Here's my concern, and it's just one game. All right, so it's a sample. All right, but here's my concern: when you were in Manhattan for the football version, the thing that jumped out to me, and I remember you and I talked about it, is like, man, these linebackers may not be of Big 12 quality. Like, that's a huge hole on the defensive side that Kansas State exposed, and we saw that was an issue all year. My concern, Trace, is do we have a backcourt that's at a Big 12 level? Because Jalen Sellers and Darius Johnson struggled. And for this team to score, they're going to have to be productive because you're not going to get consistent scoring out of your front court. It's got to come from your backcourt. They've got to be better if they have a chance to compete.
And another area of concern, you mentioned it struggles from three, 5 of 21 from three. Concerning also is that as much talk has gone into this opening game, you heard Johnny Dawkins and players in the availability this week say it was an overwhelming start for them, that they lost their composure. You mentioned Darius Johnson fouled out in this game. Is that what you want to see in terms of preparation for this road game at Kansas State? I expected more energy, more hype from them. Difficult environment, which, we're going to talk a little bit about the Kansas game. They cannot get behind in these games, double digits. They can't dig out from that.
I will say this. You're going to the number one conference in the sport in all the metrics on the road, your first game. It could be a little overwhelming. We just finished watching, as we recorded this, Houston lose at Iowa State in their first Big 12 road game. They're going to have some losses. It's tough to win on the road in this league. Having followed this league for years, it's going to be hard to win. Good teams have struggled to win on the road, let alone a team like UCF. Folks, there's no Tulsas here where there's 2,500 people in the stands. Every building's going to be packed. They're going to have to adjust to that. Whether they have the talent level to do that, I don't know. We'll see.
And Elo, you just mentioned Houston. Houston, get ready. You're going to have some more losses during the conference schedule than you did in the American.
Ain't that the truth? So obviously UCF off to a tough start, 0-1. One of the interesting discussions that we've had throughout since the football season is who would win more Big 12 games, football or men's basketball. Of course, Gus Malzahn went 3-6 in 2023. Trace, you and I were very confident. Hoops, get more wins. Johnny, how's your confidence now?
It has ebbed a little bit, Elo. I thought 5-6 wins for men's basketball. We didn't pick that UCF would win at Kansas State. I don't know that I expected them to look so, play so poorly. I'm discouraged by it, but I'm holding firm, Elo. It may just be 4, but I think Johnny can beat Gus's 3.
They're going to struggle on the road. I think I want to see this team play a couple of home games before I make I start to panic. I'm going to stick with more. I think it's 4. 6, I would throw a parade. But that's the thing that worries me because I watched almost every Big 12 team on Saturday, man. Cincinnati looks better than I thought. Beat BYU on the road. Iowa State's good. Texas Tech beat Texas by double digits in Austin. Even West Virginia was competitive. It's this league, man, top to bottom. It is. It's a bear. It's the toughest league that any UCF sport has ever participated in, by far.
Well, you mentioned not liking them so much on the road, but they got a win at home. Now they host number 3 Kansas. No place like home for the Knights. And the sellout, will this be, Elo, the biggest basketball game in UCF men's basketball history when they host Kansas?
I think it is. I think it's a significant, certainly the conversation, the Elite 8 win in the NIT against Illinois 2017 in front of 10,000 people probably is at the top. The beating Cincinnati 2019 senior night with Taco, their battle of top 25. Those are right in the conversation. But here's why I think Kansas is the biggest game. This is one of the 3 biggest brands in college basketball history. It's a blue blood. I don't think football has ever hosted a big brand in football like UCF's about to do in basketball with Kansas, who is led by Bill Self, who is one of the 10 greatest head coaches in the history of the sport, Trace. You better have your A game and your questions in the post game when you have the honor of talking to Bill Self. You may never have interviewed a coach as accomplished as Bill Self. And this is the brand. This is the standard in college basketball. This has been the standard and is the standard in college basketball. And I can't believe they're going to be in the UCF building. I think there's going to be a lot of UCF longtime fans. And I think of guys like Michael Dono who's doing the color game on ESPN+. They're going to be like, wow, Kansas in this building. That's going to be a moment, Trace.
When the schedule came out, a lot of UCF fans said, boy, the Big 12 is not doing UCF any favors. What would you schedule? What kind of schedule would you put together? Every game is tough. The opener on the road, back home with Kansas. By the way, the state of Kansas, not been so good for UCF so far in the Big 12, losing both games in football, women's basketball also with a struggle there, already with the Kansas team. So I like this matchup, but can anything top it the rest of the season, right? I mean, there's no brand on the schedule that is quite like this. So I do think, you mentioned Houston, they had them a couple of years ago. There's been some exciting games, but nothing as high profile as this on the UCF campus.
No, and look, Trace, in all seriousness, before that opening tip, I'm going to take it in. Like, to see that Kansas jersey, obviously there'll be some Kansas fans. That's a moment. I mean, you and I have gone to UCF games back to the days where they were in the TAC playing at the arena that's now known as the Venue. That's insane. If I would have told
Elo, I predate you. I saw them play in the Education Building.
I'm glad you mentioned that. It wasn't me. But if I would have told young Trace, who was in the Education Building, young Trace, in your future, you're going to see UCF host number 2 ranking.
No.
It's going to be insane. No. It's really unbelievable. And I hope that it's a great game and a great environment, and the fans support this team. This is a big moment for basketball. Take notes. And I've said this you're going to see what people that care about college basketball looks like up close in person with Kansas.
Elo, what's the split? UCF fans, Kansas fans?
It's a great question.
Because that Michigan game was a big crowd.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of Michigan fans there.
I'm going to be
I think this is like almost 50-50, I think.
I'm going to be optimistic. I'll say 60-40 UCF. Optimistic. But
I think a lot of UCF fans are selling their tickets as well to Kansas fans. So
shout out JP Gilbert. There you go. All right. Last episode, we did a draft, Trace. We did a draft of picking which UCF games are more likely for them to win. We've made some selections. I went on a limb on the predictions. Are we gonna restate our picks here? What do we want to do here, Trace?
No, we got BYU. You've got BYU Saturday. Are you feeling confident? Kansas result notwithstanding, you've got them beating BYU Saturday.
I do. I don't think BYU was as good as the ranking. They lost at home to Cincinnati. It's going to come down to this. BYU is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country, making 12 threes a game. Can UCF contain that? I think they do have a shot. I said this would be their first Big 12 win. I'm going to stick with it. Granted, my confidence shaking a little, but this game is here in the arena, Trace, the house that Trace Trylko built. Let's go. Let's go.
We also are doing some prop bets to keep things interesting this season. Over/under on Jalen Sellers, 18 points at Kansas State. I said under, you said over. You did not get that right, Elo. 2 new ones with 2 home games this week. Over/under total points, Kansas, UCF 142.5.
Yeah, that's courtesy of FanDuel on that. I'm going to go under. Because if you're UCF, you do not want to get into a track meet with Kansas, who loves to play in the 80s. I'm going to say this is a lower scoring game. I say under 142.5 as UCF keeps it close.
Got to take the opposite, but I see it as UCF. The line's only 6.5. Kansas favored by. So I think UCF plays stronger. I agree with you. I don't think they can get into a track meet with them, but I will take the over. And then for your predicted win over BYU, an announced sellout already against Kansas. Guess the attendance, Elo. Closest to between us gets this one right. Sellout? Close to? What do you got?
This is what I'm really fascinated about. 4 o'clock Saturday. I'm going to say 6475 is the attendance number for the BYU home game.
We'll do closest to. I've got 7,837. Elo, so I'm going to go a little bit higher because those American games would draw 5-6. So I think, remember, BYU drew very well when they played football at UCF. So I think a lot of visiting fans for this one. Let's bring back in Adam Eaton and wrap things up for us.
Was I supposed to write those down? Because I certainly did not. I got a page full of notes here. So Javon Baker, career UCF stats, 108 catches, 1935 yards, 12 touchdowns, does not rank in the top 10 of any category from there. So your valid point there for both of you on that one. We talked football and rankings. Heartland Sports, which covers the Big 12 exclusively, at UCF as the 5th team overall in their power rankings. You mentioned schedule the 3 games not on the East Coast: Arizona State, at Iowa State, also at TCU. All right, let's talk numbers being retired. Eric, one correction for you. You flew the number 99 to the rafters for Taco Fall. He wore 24 at UCF. He was 99
the
in the
NFL.
NBA.
Oh,
Yeah, but he wore 24 at UCF. Trace, you asked if numbers have been retired. That is incorrect. And an example of that, the number 8 by Dante has been worn famously by guys such as Storm Johnson, Daryl Mack, and this year by noted UCF Knights, Damari Henderson, and Xavier Williams, by the way. Jim Harbaugh, net worth, according to CelebrityNetWorth.com, $35 million. It would appear he could help fund a lot of NAL programs with that. And addition of Financial Arena, Eric, you hit the number on the head. 10,011 was the record for a basketball game. Did you know that the non-basketball event record, best I can tell, said in 2007, 9,921 nice folks took in an Elton John concert?
I wouldn't have guessed that one. All right.
Thank
you, Adam. One more thing before we go. FanDuel, Elo, you mentioned them earlier, say the favorites to win the College Football National Championship in 2024. Georgia, followed by Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Michigan, and Oregon. No Big 12 team amongst those. Perhaps one, maybe 2 Big 12 teams can get into the new playoff structure, but the usual suspects listed there. Look for new episodes midweek, every week on the Sons of UCF YouTube channel. Drops also on the audio feed wherever you get your downloadable content. We thank Adam, we thank Eric Lopez, and we thank you for joining us this week for Around the Kingdom.